Hello, BookTube. Sorry for the wonky lighting. We're down in puppy territory again, and it's much later. I don't have natural light streaming through the windows here. Uh, we're going to once again continue with a bookshelf tour. We're going to do another shelf of, it looks like, predominantly history. So, once again, those of you who aren't interested in history probably won't be interested in much of what we see here this time around. But we're going to start with the transverse books. It looks like this is the only shelf on this bookcase that's actually tall enough so that there's room for transverse books, and there's only one. Okay, this is an anthology, relatively recent anthology. This is from 2010 or 11. Let's see if I'm right about that. 2015. Okay, this is Reagan's Legacy in a World Transformed, and it's an anthology of long essays about the long-term effects of some of the signature stuff in Reagan's presidency, his treatment of the economy, his military buildup, his attitude towards the Soviet Union. There are some lacunae, of course. There are some omissions. This is supposed to be a volume that is relatively celebratory. So quite a bit of Reagan's other legacies are not mentioned, and some of the ones that are iffy, like his economic legacy, are written about in mostly positive terms. But still, an interesting collection of stuff. If you're, for instance, interested in the Reagan era, as I am. So what is next? This one's little. Oh, okay. This is relatively recent. This is from last year, I think. Yeah, this is from 2017. It's by Eric Hinderaker. This is Boston's Massacre, about the Boston Massacre here, and that I can walk you if you come to visit me. I can walk you straight to the place where it happened. I don't think I ever reviewed this, which now that I think on it, I loved it. I liked it quite a bit, but now that I think on it, oh, that would be bad if I didn't review it. I'll have to check and see, but I don't think I did. What's this next one? It's black. Oh, okay. I've mentioned before, this is one of my favorite living historians. This is David Kennedy. This is Aspects of Aristocracy, where he just writes about various members of the British aristocracy in the modern era. Going back, I think, probably 200 years at the absolute most. This is mostly modern history. Of what the landed gentry are like, what they're up to, what they do, what their lives are like. But really, this author could write about anything, and I would read him. He's one of those authors. He's just tremendously good. What's next here? It's a 2-volume thing. Oh, okay. All right. Well, talk about an author who'd write about anything, and I'd read it. This is one of those authors. This is the great Ronald Sim, the author of The Roman Revolution, one of a handful of absolutely must-read modern synthesis of Roman history. The Roman Revolution is a must-read book. It's got to be in this bookcase somewhere. But this is his 2-volume study of the Roman historian Tacitus. And it's just, I mean, I would imagine most of you aren't familiar with Sim. He is an absolutely scintillating historian, but the thing that stops me from recommending him to a lot of people, even history buffs, is that he's not a historian for beginners at all. He is not slowing down or pausing or especially rehearsing his methodology at all at any point in any of the books that he wrote for adults. So, although the Roman Revolution reads wonderfully, if you're not well up on the history of Republican Rome, I don't think it'll be long before it leaves you behind. And a book like this, I don't think would interest you at all, even if you're interested in the Roman historian Tacitus. If you're not familiar with reading Sim, and if you're especially have never read any other Roman history, then I can't ever recommend. People always ask me, who's your favorite historian of Rome? And I know that when they ask me that, they're looking for a recommendation, and I can't say Sim, even though he is, because I can't recommend any of his works to somebody who's just starting. I have to recommend other things instead, books that are worthy in their own way, but Sim is the deep end of the pool, and thrilling, absolutely thrilling. I think I have almost everything that he wrote. I think I may be missing. He wrote a book called Some Arval Brethren that I don't think I have a copy of. But anyway, let's see what this next one is. Oh, all right. Well, okay. If Ronald Sim is an example of a deep end of the pool historian, someone that you can't actually hand even to an enthusiast because he'll leave them behind and frustrate them, then this author is a perfect example of the opposite. A fantastic historical popularizer who writes his books in a rousing narrative from beginning to end so that you don't feel like you're reading history at all and you don't want to stop. I think we saw this author before, these 3 books, when they were in the other room. But see, that's the problem with bookshelf tours for me, is that my bookshelves aren't static at all. They're constantly moving around and shifting. Might not look at video to video, but if you were to put a time-lapse camera on it, it would be insane. So I can't, like, for instance, all of those book tags, you know those book tags where you're told, go to your 5th bookshelf and count book number 10, as if book number 10 never moves. It's just there forever. And my book collection isn't like that, and I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be extremely moving so that I'm constantly shifting things around. So this author we may have seen before, but then again, it would probably have been 1,000 videos ago, so quite a few of you probably haven't seen it. It's Thomas Costain. This is the 3 Edwards, and he does English history, and the volumes are incredible. So this is the 3 Edwards. I imagine the rest of these will be, this is the Conquerors, same series of books, and the Magnificent Century. In his Pageant of England series, and this is this is going to bother me now, because there's one of these that I don't have. I keep waiting for it to turn up at the prattle, and it never does. So what is it then? The Magnificent Century I have. The Conquerors I have. Oh, well, this doesn't say. All right, well, now I want to know. There's one of these that I don't have, that I really want. Okay, it's the 3 Edwards, the Conquerors, the Magnificent Century, and then, okay, it doesn't say. It doesn't say, but there's one other, and I don't have it. There's one other. I will buy any at the Brattle Bookshop or other used bookstores. Whenever I see Thomas Costain in hardcover, I get him. So I will find it eventually. I don't know what that other book is, but these are all just so good. They're just amazing. If you see them, on some yard sale table, moldering away, that was just recently crated out of somebody's attic, they're amazing. They don't look it on the surface, but they are. They're incredibly good. This next one has a pub sheet sticking out of it, so it's got to be new. Oh, okay, yes, this is Neil Faulkner, Lawrence of Arabia's War. Study of the Arab Uprising with a concentration on, this is from May of 2016. So, May of 2016, was that right before we met each other? Right before I started making videos? I don't remember. But this is terrific. Just terrific. Over on the biography shelf, I have a bunch of books on Lawrence of Arabia, biographies of him. And this one is, I have a few, I don't think this is the only one. I have a few historical studies of his time period, the Arab Revolt, and him just as a military leader. And this one is just very, very good. A very good example of the kind. Okay, this is a Book of the Month Club. An old Book of the Month Club edition of A Coffin for King Charles by C.V. Wedgwood. This is the story of the trial of King Charles I of England, who was his subjects, a chunk of his subjects, led by Oliver Cromwell, mounted a rebellion against his rule and were successful in unseating him, kept him in prison, and then finally put him on trial for his life. And Charles said throughout, every day in court, he said, I do not recognize this court. Even under English common law, I am entitled to a jury of my peers. I am a king. There's no other king here. So this trial is completely illegitimate. And he would often go on to say, but I'm not subject to British common law. My power, my authority comes from God. So none of this is legitimate at all. And the court didn't care. And they took scrupulous notes, found him guilty, and cut his head off. And this book brings that whole process to life because of those scrupulous notes. Because we can actually reconstitute whole days worth of dialogue from those trial days, and it's an incredibly important historical event. It's amazing to have that kind of a record. And this book does a fantastic job. I've never seen a job done better. This is the capstone volume to her great series that starts with the King's Peace, which is about the reign of King Charles I, and then it goes to the King's War, which is about the Revolution, and then it finishes off with a Coffin for King Charles. And all of them were made in the uniform Book of the Month Club hardcovers with dust jackets. But I think I only have this in the Book of the Month Club edition. I think the others have gone away. I had them once upon a time. This thing is thin. What is this? Okay, this is John Walker, this is The Coming of Rome. This is Britain before the Roman conquest, during the Roman conquest, and a little bit of immediately after the Roman conquest. And I believe this next one is the exact same subject. Yeah, it is. Okay, this is John Petty, Invasion, the Roman conquest of Britain. So these are the exact same subject. Just two different authors, most of the same supporting material, of course, most of the same archaeology, just two different viewpoints and looking at it all. Fascinating to read them back to back. I think when I originally got them, I read them back to back, and then every time I go at them again, they're so small that I kind of view them almost as one book. And what is it? Oh, okay, we're back to the Reagan era. This is Gary Wills, Innocents at Home. His scathing book about Reaganite America, about America during Reagan's presidency. Just scathing. Brilliant on every page. Very uncomfortable, especially for Reagan partisans. I knew quite a few when this book first came out. When did this come out? I knew quite a few who just virulently hated this book. This came out in 1985. In the glory days of the 1980s. And this one, oh, okay, great. This is Alberto Garcetti. This is From Tiberius to the Antonines. Big, beautifully written history of a chunk of Roman imperial rule. Beautifully written. This was a library book. And it was a tiny little library in Massachusetts, in a small town in Massachusetts, and I just happened to be in a position where I was visiting that library every day. I was working on a long piece of writing, and I used this book every day. I just read the thing in this little room. It was a library as big as a room and no bigger. It was as big as this room and no bigger. And finally, the tenure of my work came to an end, and I'd gotten to know the librarians. There were two librarians. I'd gotten to know them. I was almost always the only person there. And I eventually told them, it's Wednesday, but Friday is my last day here. Friday I finish up my work, and I also leave the area. I just wanted to thank you because you gave me a great haven, a wonderful place to do this work. And they said, well, okay, are you coming back? And I said, oh yeah, I'm finishing up the work. I'll work today, I'll work Thursday, I'll work Friday, and then I'll leave on Friday. So Friday will be the last time. And on Friday they gave me this book. They de-accessed it from their library. Apparently, I was the only one who'd ever used it, so they gave it to me. And it's tremendous. It's tremendously good. This next one looks new. Oh, yes. Okay, Mary Elise Sarratt. This is The Collapse. This is the day-by-day, minute-by-minute story of the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the unwritten authority and the written authority that were holding all of those people in place. You can see the cover. The cover is the Berlin Wall with a soldier peeking through. Isn't that awesome as a cover design? This tells the whole story. So not just the famous moments beat by beat, but all of it. The whole story, and it's amazingly good. That's why I kept it from all of the... Hello, Bean. You see me? This is from 2014. I probably have very few of the books I got in the mail in 2014, but I kept this one. Are you wondering what I'm doing down here? They're going to want to see you. There she is. Look at the camera, baby. Don't look at me. Look at the camera. I tried to tell her earlier today that she should count her blessings, that she's not a North Carolina pet, or she'd be in a carry-all right now headed for the nearest shelter. Because the situation with Hurricane Florence looks worse literally by the hour. And people who are diehard veterans of the whole area are packing up and leaving. They're I dread to think what's going to happen. I just dread. But what are you doing? Oh, baby girl, you can wait a few more books, and we'll play. We'll play for an hour. Here, let me finish. Let's continue. The little Fraulein wants to play because, as far as she's concerned, if I'm down here, that means that's the reason why. Let's see. Okay, all right. Last time we saw Rebels and Redcoats, great one-volume history of the American Revolution. Here's another great one. This is Patriots by A.J. Languth. This is a do you mind? I know. I'll be right with you. This is a terrific history of the American Revolution that takes a very cinematic approach. It gives you a certain small cast of characters and just revisits each of those characters chapter by chapter. So one chapter will be Franklin, and one chapter will be Adams, and then you go back, and the next time you get an Adams chapter, the action has moved on. It's a tough thing to do well when you organize it that way, and this is terrific. So if you see this at your used bookstore, and you have been wondering whether or not there's a book out there that really makes the American Revolution accessible, you're going to love it. It rockets along. Let's see. Okay. All right, this next one's a favorite of mine. Really should be reinforced. This is The Friends of Richard Nixon by George V. Higgins. The title being a callback, an echo, a play on The Friends of Eddie Coyle, his great novel. This is a work of nonfiction about the Nixon White House. There they are as a gang of criminals holding out against the law. And this is amazing. Just amazingly good. It's full of invective, but it's written better than any other work on Nixon because it's written by a great wordsmith, someone who didn't write as much nonfiction as maybe some of his close friends would have wanted him to. Like there's one point here that no one in the Justice Department suspected Nixon of obstructing justice. Consequently, they did not suspect his lawyer, Mr. Dean. And listen to this. This is so beautiful. There were, as a matter of fact, plenty of people who said or strongly implied that the president was doing exactly that, and he was. But the people who said it could not prove it, and the people who could have proven it were busy helping him do it. Or what about this? Couldn't be more relevant for 21st century America. The statute, which prescribes perjury before grand juries and courts, also provides for perjury before congressional committees and every other body conducting proceedings in which the law authorizes the taking of testimony under oath. You can't commit perjury by accident. Those of you who watch the nightly news and hear the term perjury trap, you can't commit perjury by accident. The statute says that the liar has to do it on purpose. He must hear a question which asks for a subject matter, the material to the investigation underway. He must swear to the contrary and know he is swearing to the contrary and intend to swear to the contrary and sit there. It's not necessary for the offense, but it's sure as hell necessary for the fellow who plans to prove the offense was committed, barefaced, hoping to goodness that the interrogator swallows the whopper because the witness or some buddy of his will be in serious trouble if the questioner starts laughing. I don't know if you can tell after all this time, if you can hear the rage, the just bitter anger in that prose. But that prose is also beautiful, the way that bitter anger often makes prose. So, of course, no one's ever going to cite this in a biography of Nixon or in a history of Watergate, but it's still the best book to read on it. Just, once again, you kind of have to know it a little. This was not written as a history of Watergate, but what a book. Let's see here. This one is reinforced. Oh, good. Oh, great. Fantastic. This is a nice big hardcover of Boswell's London Journal, which really ought to be better known. Boswell was, of course, known for his gigantic life of Samuel Johnson. But really, this book ought to be better known, because this is him in the starring role. And he's like a far less reputable version of Samuel Pepys, but every bit as confessional, every bit as morbidly confessional. So it just, you would look at this thing, Boswell's London Journal. What are the dates? 1762 to 1763. You think, oh my God, how boring could that be? There's not a boring page in here. It's all venereal disease and rotted fruits and chasing other men's wives and great observations, and also a narrator unlike Samuel Pepys who hates himself, which makes it all the more interesting. Makes it extra pathetic in a way. And then this last one's pretty big. This is our last book. Oh, great. Okay. This is a fantastic work of reference. Just fantastic. This is Mike Ashley, The British Kings and Queens. And it is big. It is a big book. And it doesn't do what you expect. You expect books like this to start off with William the Conqueror and just do the usual potted plant tour of these people. And no, this starts off long before William the Conqueror. This is every regional king, every Pictish king, every single king and queen in the history of England and Great Britain. And all of it laid out and all of it carefully scrutinized. So this author has not only put together all of the facts that he knows, but he's also weighing in on judgment on them. And after a while, you start reading the book, just you dip in just to find out, what are the actual stats on Ethelred. But then you find yourself reading. A very rare reference work where you just find yourself turning the pages and reading. I really recommend it. This was a reprint done by Barnes & Noble a long time ago, and I've never seen it in a used bookstore since. But I do recommend that you find the bigger one. There is a smaller version of this you often see it in paperback, and that actually does close to what I just described. Half the book is cut off, and the thing I think starts with William the Conqueror, but you want to hear everybody. Anybody whoever had the stones to call themselves a king or a queen, you want to read about them. And they're all in there. They're all in that volume. And that's it. That is yet another history-heavy bookshelf tour with a little puppy visit. Now I have to wrap this up and go and find her, because me coming down here to this level is an implicit promise to play with her. I just need to make sure she knows I'm good for it. So I'll wrap this up and I'll go find my little puppy. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.